Oftentimes when I walk into a classroom and see students now, they expect the actress Hilary Swank to walk out. And I walk out as an ordinary, nerdy teacher, and I can see there's like a collective pause and a little regret. And I have to remind them that I am the actual teacher who every day is in a classroom. And as an ordinary teacher, I never would have expected that students who hated school would spend every single day of their adult lives in schools beside me. That is their mission, that is their mandate. And for young people who hated school and the idea of reading a book and picking up a pen and writing, my students are now authors, they're storytellers, and they're activists. So being here in Paris and sharing their story, my hope is I can hold up a mirror to all of those educators, whether you're a classically trained teacher or a mother, or you just give of your time and your talent to help somebody in need. So our story actually started at a time when there was absolute chaos. And I left America a few days ago, and there is absolute chaos even today. So the pendulum has swung all the way around. But when I began teaching, there was so much anger, racial divisions, homicides, and the students that would walk in my classroom, most of them would rather reach for their fist and swing, reach for a gun and shoot, than pick up a pen and write. And so I had to figure out a way, how do I teach my students that writing and words can be a legacy? Because most of them that had lost someone, a friend or a father, most of them had never even read an obituary in a newspaper. Those that were lost were not recognized in our nightly news or in our newspapers. And I wanted my students to know that they matter. Their story mattered. Where they came from mattered. So what I needed to do was to find stories by storytellers who had lost. Storytellers who might have come from faraway countries my students couldn't even identify on a map, but my hope is that they could learn from a little girl in an attic, Anne Frank, or a little girl in the midst of a genocide in Bosnia in a basement, or sadly a young boy dashing away from a machete in Rwanda. So I started looking at stories in wars. And even though there was not a declared war on the streets of Los Angeles, in my city, there was 125 homicides. So in my students' mind, it was a war. In my students' mind, they thought, I have a bullseye on my chest, and at any moment, I could be a statistic. I too can be 6 feet under. I too am going to have flowers on my grave. So I wanted to teach my students the power of reframing, thinking of a different way to be bold and to be brave and to be bigger. Not with violence, not with guns, not with destruction, but using that righteous indignation and writing what needs to be written, and telling the world what it needs to be told, and declare that people needed to listen and lean in and see them. For the better part of forever, my 14-year-old students felt invisible. They were on the margins. Nobody really saw them. Nobody really listened. Nobody really cared. And my hope was, if they were able to pick up that pen and write. I like to say, write like your hair is on fire. Write with the passion and the urgency of now. Write with the idea that you can change the world, and if that world is just your world, change is still inevitable. So I decided to do something that was a little unorthodox. I went out and I got these plastic champagne glasses, sparkling apple cider, and we were going to raise our glass and we were going to make a toast to change. And originally my idea was all about academics. Maybe we would pick up that plastic champagne glass, raise it, and make a toast, and then my students who hated reading would pick up a book and read every word. Or maybe we would pick up that plastic champagne glass, make a toast, and they would pick up that pen and write all the right answers on that test. Maybe they would pick up that plastic champagne glass, make that toast, and write the perfect manifesto. But that toast was far more fundamental. They were tired. They were tired of being poor. They were tired of being picked on. They were tired of being invisible. And as each and every one of my students stood up to give that toast, the declaration was, I don't want to be pregnant by the time I turn 15 like my mom. I don't want to spend the rest of my life behind bars like my dad. I don't want to be 6 feet under by the time I turn 18 like my cousin. I want to change. And at that moment, I was scared. I'm a teacher, not a counselor or a therapist or a social worker. And I realized if I can't help my kids change, maybe the words of Anne Frank can, or Zlata Filipovich, or all of these authors who were young, who were fighting for change in their own worlds, in their own ways. So when my students started picking up that pen and writing, the stories they wrote were shocking. The things their parents did or didn't do, the things they saw that no kid should ever see. Kids who stopped being kids when they were kids and had lost their innocence. Kids who felt that they were flipping off the world and the world had ignored them for the rest of forever. But through writing, they started sharing, and they realized they weren't alone. We never envisioned that what we wrote would be bound into a book. We never envisioned that what we wrote and was bound in a book would somehow get published. And I'm very proud to say that when the book first came out, it was the #1 book in America. And it allowed me to send all of my kids off to college with their own words. They gave themselves the scholarship they needed to go to college. Oh, I love you. But now that my country is struggling, my book is also one of the most banned books in America. And I love the fact that I used to teach banned books, that my book, my students' book, is being burned and banned by politicians and pundits, and I say, bring it on. I say, bring it on, because the best way to get a teenager to read a book is to burn it, it's to ban it, it's to censor it. And I realize that Trump can't take our book out of the hands of kids. He can't take it out of libraries. And all of those teachers who are my kindred spirit want to teach it that much more. What's in that book? Not to be taught by itself, but to encourage other kids that they have stories. Other kids who also need to put down their fist, that gun, pick up a pen, and show up. Speak up. Speak out. Be seen. Because once it's on the page, you can't take it away. Once it is out into the world, people will listen, demanding change. And that's exactly what happened in my class and what my students are trying to do now in schools around the world. I love in our office, we have all of these books in shadow boxes lining a wall with all of these different languages. Books that I can't read in other languages, but I know it's our words. And right behind my desk is a book in Russian. And I know that Putin hasn't read it yet because it hasn't been banned in Russia yet, but it will be. And I say that with such glee because I've always felt that the people who make the most change get into trouble. Our namesake came from a group of civil rights activists in America. The leader of that group was a young boy by the name of John Lewis, a young boy from Troy, Alabama, who stood beside Dr. Martin Luther King when he recited the speech, "I Have a Dream." He went on to be a congressman, to serve in our nation's capital. But the reason that he is our namesake, the Freedom Riders, R-I-D-E-R, riding buses, is he'd been arrested 40 times for what he calls getting into good trouble, standing up for the voiceless, giving a voice to the voiceless, protecting the vulnerable, letting kids be kids. So when my students took that name, Freedom Rider, W-R-I-T-E-R, in honor of that icon, they realized that when we write, there's power. When we write, it has to be purposeful, and we're going to take that pain, all of that loss, and that pain is going to become our purpose. That pain is going to become our passion. And that's what my students do now. And they don't just go to any school. They go to schools like a prison. They go to schools where kids have been sent away. Because most of my kids at some point have been sent away from this class, from this school, from this community. And my students believe and have taught me, the teacher being taught by the students, that doing something bad doesn't give you that label for forever, that we can change. And at the end of every one of my students' presentations, they pick up that plastic champagne glass, sparkling apple cider, and they ask the youth of today to make their own change. So I am still a teacher. And as I stand on this stage with a microphone in hand, I get to give all of you a homework assignment. And don't worry, I'm not going to grade it. And if I did, I'd give you all an A anyways. But my homework assignment for you is to always remember that evil prevails when it's the good people that do nothing. When the good people stand idly by. When the good people don't take up their arms in those pins, those stories, and that advocacy. So since we are at a conference about change and change now, my homework assignment for each and every one of you is to do your own toast. And when you give that toast, may that toast be for each and every one of us to stand up, to speak up, and to speak out. May our collective voices be so loud that it's deafening. May our collective voices create real changes and ripples. If you are loud enough, maybe we'll hear it in America and we'll have a new government. So I'm going to do my part in my country. I hope that you do your part in your countries. But may each and every one of us believe that change is possible with something so small as a homework assignment to stand up, to speak up, and to speak out. Thank you.